Daf Nun Dal on the base on the bottom. Mitzvah Shabbos Mevorchim Tammuz Tovshin Pei Aleph. Okay.
54b1, is it?
No, not one. It's the last three words of 54b. So it would be whatever it is. Okay. The very last three words. We're about to start 55a. So the Mishnah tells us that they would spray the blood, 1 above and 3 and 7 below. So and then, after he did his titus, he would turn around. There was a kohen standing there stirring the blood the whole time so that it shouldn't congeal. And then the kohen went and took that little keli, that vessel with the blood in it. And what he did was he didn't spray 1 on top and 7 on the bottom, but he did like a matzlif. Says the Gemara, Ma'ike matzlif. What does it mean, a matzlif? Machver Rav Yehuda pointed or showed with his hand, kimenagda, like somebody whips someone. You start from the top and you work your way down. So basically, it was like 8 started from the top, and then you worked, every sprinkle you did was lower and lower and lower. So Tana, we learned, kishahu mazah. When you spray the blood, even though the pasuk says you should spray out, the pasuk says you should spray ala kapairis, on top of the kapairis. And then it says velifnei hakapairis, in front of the kapairis. So it sounds like that at least the highest one should go directly on top of the kapairis, and the other ones land on the ground. And the Gemara says, no, all 8 of them will land on the ground. So what does it mean then when it says lemaila and shiva lemata? What does that mean? So Tana, we learned, when you sprinkle these 8 different sprays, none of them land on the kapairis. Ella keneged oivish kapairis. They all land before the kapairis, on the ground itself. So they land on the ground itself. So what does it mean, lemaila and lemata? When we say that the first spraying of the blood takes place upwards, what do you mean by upwards? It means mitzadid yode lemata. It means that he turns his hand upside down. The bottom of his hand is facing the ground, and then with his finger he gives a sprinkle upwards. That's called lemaila. And the other 7, when we say that they are facing downwards, it means mitzadid yod lemaila. You turn your hand back normal, so the back of your hand is facing upwards, and then you spray 7 times downwards. That's called lemata. Says the Gemara, how do you know that the pasuk says ala kapaitis, that you should spray the blood on top of the kapaitis? How do you know that doesn't mean to spray it on top of the kapaitis? Rub the nun hey and aleph, 4 lines on the bottom, 4 lines on the top. Sorry. So how do you know that lemaila lemata doesn't mean literally lemaila means on top of the kapaitis and the other ones are on the ground? Says the Gemara, so what we have here is we're going to have 2 psukim. One pasuk talks about what you do with the blood from the goat, from the chatas, and one pasuk talks about what you do with the blood of the bull, the par of Aaron HaKohen. Each one of them, it says you spray 1 and 7. So there's 2 different numbers, 1 and 7. In the pasuk, when it talks about the goat of the chatas, it says you should bring the blood in, and you should do with the blood of the goat precisely what you did with the blood of the bull. That's all it says. And that would have been sufficient. Then he continues, and he says, and you should spray al hakapaitis, vilifnei hakapaitis. You should spray above the kapaitis, and you should spray below the kapaitis, or on the ground. That's what it says there. So we dash as follows. V'hiza oisay al hakapaitis. You should spray it, which is singular. So we know that the pasuk here is talking about the spraying that's on the higher one, and it says you spray once. You spray it. It says ala kapaitis, on the kapaitis, and velifnei kapaitis. Now l'chayda, you have to ask. L'yema lemata b'seir, the leitzarich. The l'chayda, it doesn't have to tell you where you have to land the bottom 7, because it says clearly in the pasuk, whatever you did with the bull is what you do with the goat. So why do you have to say the lifnei hakapaitis? We know already from whatever you did with the bull, you do with the goat. Why does it tell you by the goat have to spell out what you do with the 7 below? That you put it lifnei hakapaitis, it lands on the ground. Says the Gemara as follows: you don't need to tell us what to do with the 7 that goes below by the goat. It's unnecessary. The par, the Torah already told us that what you do with this air, exactly the same thing you do with the par. So why does the Torah repeat again lifnei hakapaitis, that the 7 go in front of the kapaitis onto the ground? must be la'akushe al lifnei, to tell you that the last few words of the pasuk, what you do with the lifnei is exactly what you do with the al. In other words, al doesn't mean what normally means on top of the kapitis. It actually means in front of the kapitis. So lakushe al lifnei, ma lifnei, just like when we say before the kapitis. Everyone agrees the lav al doesn't mean on top of the kapitis. It means in front of it and lands on the ground. Af al, the lav al. So also al, when it's in the pasuk al, it doesn't mean al, it means in front of the kapiris. Because otherwise, why would the Torah have to repeat again with lifnei kapiris when you can just learn it out from a bull? So it must be to tell you that to make an equation that al is compared to lifnei, and just like lifnei definitely means in front of, al means in front of the kapiris. So we know that the lamaila of the goat is in front of, and we already explained maila mata means the way your hand is, which way your hand is facing. Says Gemara, that's how you want to learn. Adrab, I can ask you a question. On the contrary, lo lamaila b'par, when it comes to the other pasuk, when it talks about the bull, and it tells you over there as well that you should spray with your finger. It says al pnei kapitis, kedma, and then it says, and before the kapitis, it says release the kapitis, you spray 7 times. And it starts off saying, and you have the finger al pnei kapitis. So let me ask you a question. When it comes to bull, since the Torah says that the goat and the bull are exactly the same thing, why was it, and by a goat, it says clearly in the Torah what you do with this, with the one, you spray 1. Lamaila. So why does the Torah have to repeat it by par again, telling you that you have to spray 1 bezboy al pnei kapitis? Okay, but why do you say that? We already know that the bull and the goat are the same. So by the goat, the Torah tells us what to do with the one. It says spray 1. What you do, lamaila al kapitis is 1. By the bull, the Torah tells you what to do with the lamata, 7. And you ask me, why does the Torah have to mention at all the lifnei kapitis, which is lamata by the seir? We can learn from par, and if you want to make an equation, I'm asking the other way around. Why does the Torah by par have to say that you spray the 1 lamaila on top of the kapitis when we already know from seir exactly what to do? It's extra to say the mila by par. Why? The letzadich is unnecessary. The gomma mila this is, since we equate the 2 kabbanas, and whatever applies to the goat applies to the bull. So lama nema. So why does it Torah say it all? La'akushe lifnei la'al, to compare, to equate lifnei to al. And I'll say just the way around. I'll say it says by the bull lifnei kapiris, which is unnecessary, and then it says what do you call it? Al. So al pnei kapiris by the top. It's al is totally unnecessary because we can learn it from goats. And you know why the Torah said it? To tell you exactly the opposite. To tell you when we said the bottom 7 should be in front of the kapitis, we didn't mean literally in front, we meant on top of the kapitis. Exactly the opposite. Ma'al al mamish, just like al means literally above. Af lifnei al mamish. Maybe lifnei also means above. Why are you focusing on the goat? Let's focus on the bull, and there it's extra the one that's on top. Maybe it's coming to tell you that just like on top means literally on top, so too the ones that we say in front of means literally on top as well. So you want to high mind? What are you talking about? How can you compare? If you learn the way we intended to learn, that lamata the seir, that to talk about the goat, the 7 that you do it before, is totally superfluous, and therefore the only possible reason is to tell you that lifnei kapitis, the al is like lifnei. That what? Lifnei is extra, so we're saying that the al is like lifnei, which means that everything goes in front of the kapitis, nothing goes on top. Makes sense. La kushe lemaila de par, la kushe is to equate that the top means in front of. Then you ask me a question. So how come by par, by a bull, it mentions about the sprinkling the blood on top? They have a good explanation for that as well, even though it's extra. Lemaila de par, you know why it says by par? You have to spray above as well. Lemeboile, you need to look at Tana Rebbe Yaakov. The Tana Rebbe Yaakov, it says in pasuk al pnei hakapitis kedma. It says in pasuk that you should spray it in front of the kapitis. Kedma on the eastern side. So Zabona of Kol Mokum, whenever it says the word Pnei, Eina Ela Kodem, whenever it says anywhere in the Torah the word Pnei, we know it means the east side. So in other words, why does the Torah give us this extra pasuk about spraying the blood of a bull upwards? It's not so much to tell you that, you could learn that from a goat. It's not to compare top to bottom, but to tell you that whenever it says Pnei, it means on the eastern side. Eliam, if you tell me the way you're learning.
If you're spraying right in front of it, that is on the eastern side.
Yeah, but the Torah adds the word Pnei. Yeah, when you're walking into the Kodesh Kodashim, you are from the eastern side. But with the Torah as the word Pnei, tell you that in other places, if I ever tell you the word Pnei, you should know it means, even if you don't know what direction, I'm talking about the eastern side. So
Do we have any examples of that?
Honest offhand, I can't tell you what the example
It's a
would
bit
be.
superfluous because where else do we have eastern
No,
side?
the Rishonim talk about it. There's some Rishonim, I can't remember offhand right now, sorry. Maybe the Ritva that tells you where else you have. Give one or two examples. It says word Pnei, and we wouldn't have known which side it means, but because it says now we know, it means the eastern side. I can't remember offhand where it is. Sorry. But interesting, Rashi doesn't tell us. So it takes much further. Sorry, I lost my place. Just 1 second. Ella, if we're going to say the other way you try to learn, if you're going to say the other way, which is that let's say that the Lamaila by power is extra, and therefore by power is coming to tell you that just like the one spray above is on top of the kapiris, so the 7 below actually mean on top of the kapiris. If you can learn Lamaila, the power lakusha lamata, to compare it to lamata, say the other way around, that everything has, even the 7 has to be done on top of the kapiris, then lakusha to make a hekesh, tell me lamata the seir lamayasa. So why by a goat does it talk about the 7 that go below? What do you need it for? Since the Torah already says whatever you do by a bull, you do by a goat. If you learn my way by learning from a goat, then the fact is mila by a par is teaching you the thing about Pnei is eastern side. But if we're going to say that we learn everything from the par, everything goes on top of the kapiris, then we look at the seir. Okay, I need to tell me the one because we know that Lamaila is 1 sprinkle. We wouldn't have known from the part, doesn't mention it how many. But why do I need to tell me again the 7 below when the Torah already says whatever you do by a par, you do by a seir? That's extra, and there's nothing to learn. Unless you learn our way, to tell you that just like lifnei means in front of, al also means in front of. Says the Gemara, that's what we learned. He's a ala kapayus. The Torah says you should spray by the goat on top of the kapayus, in front of the kapayus. Lamadna, we learn out kama lemailas. How many sprays should you do going upwards when your hand is the back of your hand is facing the ground and you're sprinkling it upwards this ear by a goat? Achas, it's 1. Lemata bisir and yidei kamba. But when it comes to goat, when you say you also spray now a number of times downwards, I don't know how many. Hareini done. So then I will make the following analysis or analogy. Nemru dami lemata bepar. By a bull also it says the word dam. But nemru dami lemata, by a goat it says also facing downwards you should sprinkle the blood. So I'm going to make now a comparison. Ma lemata bepar sheva. Just by a bull it's 7. Af lemata bisir sheva. By a goat also it's 7. Says the Gemara, who says? Maybe you should go down a different direction and learn the following. Who told you to learn a goat, compare a goat, the 7 below a goat to the 7 below a par? Maybe you should compare all the sprinkles of a goat, that whatever you spray downwards is the exact same amount, just spray upwards. Because the Torah by a goat only tells you how many to spray upwards, doesn't give you a total how many you should spray downwards. So why did you decide to compare it to a bull? Isn't it better to compare to the other spraying that's by a goat, which is upwards, and that's only 1? So maybe demalamayla v'sir, but demalamayla says blood demata v'sir. Malamayla v'sir achas, just like when going upwards is 1. Aflamata v'sir achas, also going downwards should only be 1. So we have 2 ways of learning. Which is better? So let's see logically, which one is more comparable? It makes more sense. Donin mata memata will compare the 2 situations, which is spraying downwards. You have spraying downwards by a goat. You have spraying downwards by a bull. So we'll compare the 2. The ain't done in mata memata. We're not going to compare the spraying downwards by a goat to the spraying upwards. So who said? Maybe quite the contrary. Done in gufa megufa. You should learn something from itself. If you are going to spray the blood by a goat downwards and spray it upwards, doesn't it make sense to compare the downward movement to the upward movement? Just like upwards, it's only 1 spray, downwards also it's only 1 spray. They ain't done in gufa ma'alma. Why compare it to a totally another carbon? Therefore, the pasuk has to say, but also as dama kasha also dama par. The Torah clearly says you do the activity you do with the blood of the seir of the goat. It is identical to what you do with the par of arnakai. Why does it say over here kasher asa? It says you should do to the cow. Why is it kasher asa? Why does it say kasher asa? What? It should all be exactly the same. So therefore, why is it? And not only that, the Torah already spelled out already that you spray the goat upwards. So why does it say kashrasa that you did? To tell you it's exactly the same you do by a bull is what you do with a goat. Makes no difference. And then in what sense? So kishem. So mata bepar sheva, since by a bull when you spray downwards it's 7 times. Kach lamata b'sheva. So to by a goat you spray 7 times. Lamada we learned kamo lamata bepar uvisir sheva. So we know that you spray 7 times downwards. Lemaila b'par, what about upwards now? By bull, when the Torah talks about a bull upwards, it doesn't tell you how many times to sprinkle the blood. Any day come, I don't know how many, but in the number dumb the milo. So now I have to make a comparison. I'll say, well, it says dumim spraying upwards, this eve, and then dumb the milo b'par. And it says also by a bull spraying upwards, we're going to compare it to a goat. And there by a goat, the Torah says he's a oisai in singular, which means only one. We know it's only one sprinkle. So too by a bull, when the kohen sprays upwards, he sprays only one. Maybe it's another way to go. It says by a par, you should spray 7 times downwards. By par, it says you should spray upwards without giving us a quantity. So wouldn't it make sense? By a par, downwards is 7 times. So too by a par upwards, it should be 7 times. Shouldn't we compare the par to itself? We should have the upward movement similar to the downward movement. And the Torah doesn't specify the upward movement, how many. Says Imar again, needle midainin, which is more comparable. Donin maila memaila will compare upward movements from an upward movement. In other words, we're going to compare the bull to the goat. The ain't donin maila mat. We're not going to compare an upward movement for a downward movement. So why don't we say donin gufa megufa? You should learn the activities of the bull from the other activities of the bull. The ain't donin gufa malma. Why compare it to the goat? You should make with his blood exactly the way you did. So why does it say like you did? Why? What if it say kasher asa? Just say make the blood the same. He said the pastor said, "But asa is dame kedama par." Make the blood like the par. Why is it kasher asa like you already did? Matam like kasher asa. She called asi that every activity that you handle, that you deal with a bull, should be identical to the goat. Just like when you buy the bull, downward movement is 7. By goat also downward movement is 7. Like by a goat, upwards is 1. So upwards is 1. Now, in the Mishnah, we say this in davening on Yom Kippur by the Avodah. It's achas. There's one movement upwards, and then he starts counting. Achas va'achas. There's only one up, and then we start going down. So first movement down is achas. Achas is the one that I did up, and the one I'm doing now down. Then he says achas v'shtayim, the one that I did up, and now I'm doing 2 sprinkles. And achas v'shalosh, what I did up, and now is 3, and keep on going. So turn up what we learned: achas, achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chamesh, achas v'shish, achas v'sheva. Divir Rameir, which is the way we say it. Rabbi Yehuda says, and this is Rashi's gifts. Others have a different gift. Rabbi Yehuda says, achas, achas v'achas, shtayim v'achas. He has the larger number first. Sholosh v'achas, arba v'achas, chomesh v'achas, sheish v'achas, sheva v'achas. So he counts the numbers different than the way we count them. Achas v'shtayim, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. He has 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 4 and 1. So what's going on? But like, please, there's no argument. Mar kiasrei, umar kiasrei. Each one does it their way. By what? One of them counts, that's like 21, 22. In Yiddish, how do we count in Yiddish? We say the smaller number first. 22, 23, right? So 22 is not 22, it's 2 and 20, 3 and 20. So, and that's, so the way most Rishonim learn is that Rab Meir counts first the smaller number, then the bigger number. So 2 and 20, 3 and 20. And Rabbi Yehuda counts first the bigger number, 22. So first you do, the 2, the 3, the 4, and then you do, shtayim v'achas, sholosh v'achas. But Rashi doesn't learn that way. And the Mefarshim actually have a very difficult time understanding Rashi. Rashi learns exactly the opposite. The Rab Meir says you count 21, 22, 23, and yet he says, hey, you do 1 and 2, 1 and 3. So they try and understand Pshat and Rashi. So the general Pshat and Rashi is, the reason why we count 22 is 20 is the main number, and 2 is sort of ancillary. Or secondary. The larger number is the main number. So it's not, it doesn't mean larger and smaller. It means the main and the secondary. When it comes to the sprinkling the blood, the main one is the achas. And the other one is secondary. That's why it says achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh. He counts 22 because 20 is the main one. And he counts achas v'shalosh because achas is the main one. One that you go upwards. Okay, that's how we learn. Anyway,
It does not have anything to do with the actual action, the actual hand movement. You did one, and then you did the other numbers. No, you did the one up, and then you did two down, one up, three down, one up, four.
And so why does Rabbi Yehuda argue?
What?
Why does Rabbi Yehuda argue?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
So we're saying they're not arguing.
What's the logic? He did the action before he did. So you do the number and then you do the action, or how did
every time?
How did it work?
Every action he did, right before he did it, he said that.
Oh.
Right before he sprayed, let's say the first one down, he said achas v'achas, he would spray. Achas v'shtayim, he would spray. And of course, Rabbi Yehuda, they would say shtayim v'achas, and he would spray. So they both say the same thing. The question is how we count it.
In other words, you're both saying you got to refer back to the first one. Even though you're counting still numbers, you've got to refer to the first one. The question is, what comes first, the spray you're doing now or the original spray that you did upwards? Because you're only counting single numbers here. It's not like 2021 and so on.
Yeah, but I did, which is the klal, which is the prat, or which is the main number. That's how it actually learns.
So according to Rab Meir, the main number is number one, the first one you sprayed.
According to everybody, the first one, the mile, is the main number. But how do you normally count? First the main and then the secondary, or first the secondary, then the main? That's how it actually learns.
Even though you're counting
2 and 20 or 22?
Yeah, but here you're only counting single because you're counting 2, you're counting 3, you're counting 4, you're not counting 20s.
I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
You're counting two different numbers. One is a larger number and another is a small number. That's how most Israelis learn. It actually has nothing to do with larger or small, it has to do which is the ikr and which is the tafel, or which is the klal and which is the prat.
This couple seems a bit irrelevant when you actually look at the wording of the Gemara. It's actually not saying because of which is the main, which is not, just how you count wherever you live normally.
Yeah, so you're saying pshat like the Ritva. Another Rishonim, but Rashi doesn't say that. So in Rashi, we have to change the pshat around because Rashi must have learned a different way. Others want to say that Rashi actually had a different version of what Rabbi Yehuda Meir said, and he actually agrees with them. But others say what I just told you. Different ways of learning pshat. Okay, the Gemara continues. However, everyone agrees. The question is, why do you have to continue to remind us that you did achas, one going upwards? What's the relevance? You finished, you finished. My time at the reason is we want to give you a pause between each sprinkle so that you'll remember where you're up to. So you keep on spraying it like this, you'll remember. This is why you pause, you say achas, oh, and you pause, you say achas v'shtayim. So you don't make a mistake what number you're at. That's one way of learning. The other way of learning is, Rabbi Yechon says, Amakra, there's a pasuk. The lifnei hakapot says in the pasuk, the lifnei hakapot is yaza, by the bull. It says before the kapot is used to spray 7 times. Shein tam alem yaza. Why do you have to say spray 7 times? We're talking about spraying. Umat tam alem yaza. Why does it say yaza? Limit al hazor shayna shetzricha min yugalach v'achas. You have to constantly remind us that you sprayed once before, and therefore it joins all the other sprays. My benai, what's the difference if the reason is we don't want you to go to make a mistake, or the reason is because the Torah says you have to always remember the first one? The reason, the difference would be the loy monav. Let's say he forgot to mention the achas all the way going through, but he didn't make any error. Was he yaitz or did he have to do it all over again? And we say it depends. If you learn that's exeris a kasa, that yaza, you have to remember all the time that one that you sprayed upwards, you got to do it again. But if the whole point is we're worried that you'll make a mistake, he didn't make an error, why bother repeating it again? Now, the easiest thing you would think would be just tell him count 8, and there won't be any mistakes. Count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There won't be any errors. And the reason why we do that is because the Torah sort of separates the two sprinkling as 2 separate mitzvahs. One is the achas l'mayla, which is one mitzvah, and there's another mitzvah because the Torah divides them into 2 separate psukim. By the goat, he talks about the l'mayla. By the par, he talks about the l'mata. It's like 2 separate avodas, so we have to keep them separate. Says the Gemara, Yotza. So then we had an argument. Okay, he finished first with the bull, and then he would take the blood and put it down, and take the blood of the goat, and then go out and sprinkle it. Go to the kodesh who doesn't sprinkle. So we had 2 opinions. Remember, the Tanakama said there were 2 separate bases. One base, there were a golden base that held the blood of the bull, and one golden base held the blood of the goat. So when he came out of the kodesh kodashim with the bowl of the blood of the bull, he would put it down on this stand, there in this base, and then he would turn around, pick up the blood of the goat, and go inside. Rabbi Yehuda said there was only one base there. So while you were in the Kodesh Kodashim sprinkling the blood of the bull, the blood of the goat was sitting on top of the base. So when he came out, first he had to pick up the blood of the goat before he put down the blood of the bull. That's what the Mishnah said. It says the Gemara, Yotzi went out, al Kain Hazor, Shebechli went out and he placed it on this cane of this base out there in the Heichel. Tanahas we learned. Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, so we're not going to talk about Rabbi Yehuda. So we learned over there, Rabbi Yehuda says, Loi hoya shofres. There were no, in the base Hamikdash, there were 13 different kola shofres because these were like boxes. And we learned that they're shaped like a shofar so that it's very narrow on top and wide on the bottom. So we don't want people coming in and putting their hand in and helping themselves to some of the coins. So it's shaped like a shofar. There were 13 different shofars for people putting in different kinds of donations for the Beis Hamikdash. So we learned over there. Rabbi Yehuda says, Loi hoya shofars. He says there were no shofars likine chayva. He says that there was a woman who gave birth, or a woman who was a zava or a zav. They have to bring at the end of their period. They have to bring a twin set of birds. One was a carbon oila, which gets totally burnt, and one was a carbon chatas, a sin offering. So he says that even though there was a shofar there for people who want to give donations to birds to keep the mizbeach busy, but there was no box there for the birds that people needed for a chayv. There's no box there. Says, and why not? Why wasn't there? So he says, mipnei hataruvus. We're worried that it'll get mixed up. What do you mean it'll get mixed up? What's going to get mixed up? Says, my mipnei hataruvus. Rabbi Yehuda said, mipnei taruvus chayve ben adava. Because what happens that the birds of the chayv and the negava would get mixed up. And what would happen is, with the money of an oila, you can buy other oilas. But with the money of a chatas, it's only the designated for a chatas. You cannot use the money of a chatas for anything else. So Buddha says, "No, what? We're not going to have it in the base Hamikdash at all." Now, Tais already asks. So why aren't you worried? Why aren't you worried? Let's say you had a box. What do you call it? Let's say, why aren't you worried about chayv and chayv? A bunch of people put in money. My chatas, my money chatas is for me, and your money chatas is for you. And so on and so forth. But remember, every person had two, an oila and a chatas. So why aren't we worried? The money got all mixed up together, and the money, you'll have some money that belongs to a chatas and some money that belongs to an oila. So the problem is not nedava versus chayva. The problem is oila versus chatas. So places when they used to, according to the opinion that they put in money as well, they had a shofar for the chat for this kinim for the chatas and the oila. Each person put it in a little bag, or they had a little handkerchief, and therefore monies inside there never separated from there to something else. Says Taisa then, says the Gemara. So that's a very good question. Okay, you tell me you can't have both. You can't have a shofar for chayva and a shofar for the dava. So just have chayva. Why just have the dava? Chayva is more important. Have just a shofar for chayva, so there won't be any problems. I don't have a shofar for the dava. Says Taisus, because there were a lot more money going into the box for donations than the box for the chayv, number one. And number two is, when it comes to the dava, sometimes the mizbeach was full all the time. There was no need to use the money. The money had to sit somewhere. When it came to chayva, the women came in the morning and they expected that very day. If you remember, we learned the kohanim would not leave the day unless they used up all the money that was sitting there for these chayvas. They would make sure they used it up. So they didn't need a box for it, because as soon as they came, they took it straight away and did whatever they had to do. Says the Gemara, he says, I don't understand. The Navet today, so why in the world doesn't he make two? And have two shofars. Why do you have two shofars? And then just write on each one exactly which is the chayv, which is the dava. Nobody's going to mix up. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, less like Siba. Rabbi Yehuda holds that he doesn't rely on writing. He says that nobody knows what it says in the writing. I don't rely on writing. Therefore, don't have chayva there at all, because people might unfollow. They'll put in the dava by mistake in the chayva box. We don't want it. We don't. People, you cannot rely on writing. Says the Gemara. How do I know?
The collection box got to do with putting the blood on a stand?
We didn't get to that. We'll get to that soon. we're working our way in that direction. Says the Gemara. Right now, we're talking about the concept that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't trust writing. Okay, that's what we're saying right now. And the Tnan we learned, Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda says that there's only one base over there. Now, why? Why was there only one? Why is there only one? What was he worried about? Today, my time, you know why he didn't have two in our Mishnah? He didn't have two bases, one for the blood of the bull and one for the blood of the goat. Because he's scared you might put down and you'll forget, the Kohen Gadol will forget later which is the blood of the bull and which is the blood of the goat. If you have two different ones, he'll forget. The way Rabbi Yehuda has it now, it's impossible ever to forget. There's only one base there. When he walks out of the Kohen Gadol, he's holding the bowl of the blood of the bull. He picks up the other bowl, which he knows now is the goat, and he puts down the bull. He'll never make a mistake. But if you have two different stands and then you put them down, and so afterwards he might forget, oh yeah, which one did I just put down? Which one did I take? Which one should I take? And it's confusing. That's why he avoids it. So the question is, what's the big deal? Right on the two stands, put a big sign over here. This is the dam of the goat, and I put a big sign here. This is the dam of the bull. Why is he worried? Right? Let's have two. The left of Alayu hide the pav, hide the side. Let him write on each one what it is. Ella must be Rabbi Yehuda less like Siva. Now you see the link. So it must be Rabbi Yehuda holds that writing is, you cannot trust, you cannot rely on writing. People don't really follow instructions, and so on. Says Gemara, is that so? So you tell me if he doesn't believe it, right? Let me ask you a question. Basically, I'll ask you a question. It says a total of there were a total of 13 horns of these boxes in the base of Migdash, and they were written on them. One box said Taklin Chalatin. The people brought 3 times a year, remember Shkolim, 3 times a year they brought the new Shkolim. They would use it for all the kabbanas of that year, and they would write on the box, these are the new coins. Then they had another box, Taknechalati. People who didn't give yet their coins from last year would bring it, but they went in a separate box. And that money we learned went to maintain Yerushalayim, the walls and everything else. So that's called the old coins. Then you have the kinyan. Then you had another box there for there's these kinyan. Then you had another box for the goizle oila. You had another box for the smaller birds for an oila. The eitzim, another box for the wood. The levina for the frankincense. Another box for the zov. The kapoides, another box for the gold. Of the kapoides for the kapoides, Rashi says means clay sharis. It's called kapoides, and bishisha. And then there were 6 linadava, and there were 6 also for donations. A lot of donations there. So keep them as busy in case there were no kabbanas. He would buy animals with that and keep them as busy with birds. Now, what's takli charatin? Elu shkolim shekol every year the new shkolim they put it in this box called the new coins. Takin atikin, what's the old coins? Mishal shokolish takin yishkol shonabah. If you didn't, for whatever reason, you didn't bring your obligation, the machzah shekel, you bring it now, and we'll put it in the box called the old coins. Kinyan, what's kinyan? Hain toidin. These are the larger birds, larger pigeons, and goizle oile b'nei yoina. These are the doves. They're smaller birds. The kulan oiles. And what happens to all of these birds? David Abiyah says, I don't want any chayvus. I don't want that twin pair of a chattas and oil like we learned before because you get mixed up. All of them were oilers. Now, who's saying this? Yehuda. And it's clearly written that they wrote on the outside of every shayfer exactly what it is. So what he tell me, Rabbi Yehuda didn't believe in writing because he felt he cannot trust it. Clearly, he had all of these different boxes, and each one, you're right, exactly. The new coins, the old coins, he did trust it. He did trust writing. He also, in Israel, I'll tell you the pshat is, you know what he's worried about? You know what he's worried? Zayd, he was worried. He did trust her. He's worried. Zayd, he was worried in the case of the kinyan. You'll have an oil and a chattas. What happens if the woman, let's say, you brought one of those sets of oil and chattas, she dies. And now, what do we learn? Our 5 chatois that if one of them is that if the owner died, that chattas, you cannot do anything with it. You have to let it die. But now it's all mixed up with all these other ones. We're not worried you're going to mix up in the double. There you're right on the outside. Everyone can keep the separate. We're worried about that on this shayfer, which is the chayv shayfer. In there, you're going to have one package that the person died. And now one of them you cannot use. You know which one. So you can't use any of them. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? We're worried that somebody might have died. Remember, they just brought it. Somebody would have died already so soon. But now we learned, if you send your karma chatzim overseas, so it takes more than just a day. is makrivin, so you can still go ahead and bring it on mizbeach. Becheskes shukayim. We have no right to assume the person is dead. Every person has a cheskes chaim. Every person we're going to assume status quo. The person was alive 2 weeks ago, probably still alive now, unless they're very old, as we're going to get into. Ella mishum chatas. I'll tell you what we're worried about. We're worried not that we're worried about maybe somebody will die. We're worried about that. What happens? Taka heard that the person died, and now you're stuck. Because somewhere buried, there might be 60, 70 different bundles of coins. One of those bundles of coins is made up of a chattas where the owner died for a fact. And what do you do now with the rest? You can't bring up any of them because you don't know which one is the one that's ruined. Says the Gemara, what's the big deal? The nivrer arba zuzi. Just take 4 coins. That's the price that they paid for each bird. Take four zuzi, and the nishda b'mayit, throw it away. And then we'll assume that the one that you threw away, that was probably the chattas that the owner died. And the hanach literally are permitted. Then why would you do something like that? Can you imagine if he had something treif, falls in a kosher pot? Can we say just take a spoonful of whatever food it is, throw it out and say, oh, I just threw out the treif? No such thing. So what do you mean over here that let's just assume that we throw it out, the 4 coins out of this box, and we'll say that's the woman that died. So therefore, what Rashi learned in Summer Training, we're talking about, and let's apply the rule of Brera, retrospectivity. Let us say that all along, this coin, these were the coins that belonged to that person. Let's say that now that this is no longer part of the box, it's probably all along, these were the coins of the person that was in the box. Others say that you actually have to add every person who puts it in the box, as if they're thinking that if I die, chas v'shalom, then they throw it out, it'll be my coins that are thrown out. So we don't know that until it actually happens. So we employ the rules of Breda, and therefore we're saying, so why not just throw away the 4? What's the problem? Let him have a box of chayiv, put on the outside the word chayiv. You worry about somebody will die, throw out the 4 coins. Says the Gemara, now, when it comes to our Mishnah, why do you have 2 different bases? Why does the Yehuda say you don't have 2 different bases if now that we know you can write? Why is he worried? The Gemara later on tomorrow will tell us, because Chul should the Kohen Gadol is so weak he cannot focus anymore, that he's fasting and doing all these other activities and is up all night. We're scared that he won't read it properly or won't even bother reading it, and he just wants to get over and done with. And that's why we're worried that Rabbi Yehuda, even though generally he relies on writing, but not on Yom Kippur. From Chul should the Kohen Gadol. But getting back over here, why he doesn't have a separate box for Chayva, and we're asking a question. Let's use the rule of Breda. So we answered he doesn't believe in Breda. How do you know that he doesn't believe in Breda? How do you know that? So this is a Gemara we have quite a few times in Shas, and it's exactly the same Gemara in every single time. So the Gemara says as follows: Ilema, is it Maharat Nan? Is it tomorrow's okay? Is it Maharat Nan? We learned. If somebody buys wine from a goy Erev Shabbos. Now, Ben Kusim or a nation of people, we have Machlekes Amei Rabbi Yehuda whether they were valid Gerim or not. We know that they all became Jewish, and then many years later they noticed that every year they would make a trek into the forest sometime middle of the year, and once they followed them and they saw they went to Haragrizim, and there they had these doves up there and they worshipped them like idols. So that's when Eden decided we no longer have anything to do with them. But the question is, until that moment, were they genuine or not? What happened was they were attacked by lions. They were frightened out of their wits. They asked the Eden to help them, and they converted. The question is, are they gede aroyas? Did they do it purely out of fear? They were never genuine, never sincere, and therefore we don't really accept them as Eden at all? Or do we say gede emesem? The Rameir says that at the time they were genuine. Later on, they became kala. So this Mishnah goes according to Rameir. According to Rameir, at the time when you're allowed to drink the wine from a kusim, they were all right. So if you buy wine from a kusim, it's Erev Shabbos, a minute before Shabbos, and you don't have time to get prum and mice and all that. So what happens? He stands and he says, Shnei lugin shani osid lahafrish. I have 100 truma. You have to give averages 2%. I can't do it now before Shabbos, and on Shabbos you're not allowed to do it for different reasons, like the boirer or makabe patish. You can't do it on Shabbos. So I won't be able to do it after Shabbos, but I want to drink wine now on Shabbos. So I'm going to set it. I'm going to say that tomorrow night I'm going to separate 2 lug of wine, and you should know it's retroactive. It's as if it already was taken out before Shabbos, and therefore this wine that I'm going to drink, whatever I drink, is definitely not part of those 2 lugin, even though they're all mixed together in the same barrel, because what you do later reflects on what happened in the past. That's truma. Asara Sorry, just two more lines, but unfortunately, it's only two lines in the next page. Asara, now I have to give Maisa 10%. So it's not exactly 10, it's 9.8, but Asara Maisa edition. I'm going to tell you Shabbos, I'm going to separate, and that'll be Maisa edition. Tisha, 9 is Maisa. If you have 90 left, or a little bit less than 90, roughly, we're just doing rough numbers, whole numbers, is Maisa Sheni. So 9 is Maisa Sheni, but the Maisa Sheni, I don't have to wait till Motzei Shabbos. Right away, I can swap over the Maisa Sheni on money sitting on my table, and I'll say that this money takes over the Kedusha of Maisa Sheni. The Shaisa Miyad, I can drink straight away. Rameir holds, we believe in Yesh Breira. We'll say that at Motzei Shabbos, when you separate all those things, you've proven that all along, that was the wine that was Truma, that was the wine that was Maisa. Just three more lines to finish tomorrow. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Oisin. Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot rely on that. You cannot drink the wine on Shabbos. In other words, it seems to me clearly he doesn't believe in Breira. So we see clearly he doesn't believe in Breira, and that's why your question was, let's take out 4 coins and throw it out and say that was the chatas that the owner died. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't believe in Breira in retrospectivity. Alma, we see clearly from here, ain't Breira, there's no Breira. So just 3 more lines. How do you? The Gemara says no proof of it. Dilma shiny hasam, there's different. There's nothing to do with Breira. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda agrees in the concept of Breira, and we still have a problem understanding why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't throw away 4 coins and say that was the owner of the chatas. But that was the chatas. If he does believe in Breira, how come he argues Meir does not say you could drink the wine? So he says that the first time, this is clearly the reason there. They said to Rameir, even if you believe in Breira, aren't you concerned? Shema Yivoka Hanoid. What happens sometime between Friday night and Motzei Shabbos? The barrel breaks, so they won't have the opportunity to set aside the Truma and the Maisa Motzei Shabbos. You take a big risk here. The only way Breira works is if you actually go ahead and implement it. The Motzei Shabbos, you do that activity, you'll say, okay, it's retrospective. But what happens? The barrel breaks, and you're not able to set aside Truma Maisa. Finished. You've eaten tevel, which is chaymis and all that. The nimtza shoysa tivla mafrei. You're eating tevel retrospectively, so therefore we don't rely on it. But Rameir said, I'm not worried. If it breaks, it breaks, but generally it won't break. So what do we see from all this? That Rabbi Yehuda, you have no proof either way, whether Rabbi Yehuda holds Breira or does not hold Breira. So maybe Rabbi Yehuda does hold Breira. My question is, why don't we throw it away? So you argue Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold Breira. Prove it to me Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold Breira. And that's where we stop, and you'll continue tomorrow. The Gemara continues on the subject.
Motl,
yes.
when he goes to sprinkle the blood in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, does he take the bull and the in two separate flasks, the bull and the soya, yeah?
2 separate occasions. He goes back out and takes the other one. He doesn't take them together.
Oh, so once he goes out all the way to the Azorah.
The blood is weighing there in the Heichel.
Oh, so that's what I'm asking. So the blood is waiting in the Heichel. So isn't he concerned that it'll congeal?
No, I guess there's another coin standing there, or maybe it's actually standing in Azora. There's another coin standing in Azora stirring it.
Somebody has to always shaking it, right?
That's right. You have to stir it and so on. Yes. Anyways, nice seeing you all.
So if there's a coin stirring it, then how do you get mixed up?
You said the coin there knows what he's stirring. Exactly. Who say no? Just give him a pot with the what do you call it? The thing with blood.
Okay.
And another thing is maybe there was no stirring because the whole activity took a minute. How long did it take? He walked in and he just sprinkled and then came right back out. Maybe for 2-3 minutes they just put it down on these stands and nobody was stirring it. It just sat there because it didn't congeal such a short time.
So is the shchita done all together with the bull and the soy is done together and they take in the blood together, or do they do the shchita one at a time? Kill the bull, take the blood and bring it inside and start using it, or is it done all together?
The shchita was done one after another, and therefore you have both blood. The shchita of the power was done a while ago, and for a long time the kohen standing in and stirring it, but nothing is done with the blood; it's still there. Then he goes does the ketores, right? And that was the whole activity before. And then he shechts the seir, and now he has 2 things of blood, and he puts them either on one. But we just learned he takes the power straight, and that's when he takes the power and he goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And Moshe, probably nobody was stirring it, probably just sitting there on that base.
But those
so
are
quick
done together. It's not separate ceremonies all the way through. They're sort of done together in stages, and then one after another. They do the killing together, and then they bring the blood together, and then they do the sprinkling together.
That's not how it worked. There was a
No, it's consecutive, one after another. It was a separate activity, separate kabbanas. This was a carbon for Klal Yisrael. This is a carbon only for Kohanim. There was two separate avodas, the par versus the seir.
And then there was a Ketuvos in between.
In between. Yeah, exactly right. And now when this year Kippur Mitzvah, when we're going to daven, you read the avodah, you'll see how everything comes to life. Everything will make sense.